Good afternoon from London. It's a bit of a dull and uninspiring afternoon here. Not too much summer here today. And hello to all dear comrades, friends, and supporters from me, Dr Dermot Hudson, the chairman of the British Group for the Study of the Juche idea, chairman of the Korean Friendship Association, and official delegate of the Korean Friendship Association for the UK, and the owner of this very self-same channel, Songam 007, the militant voice of Songam and Juche, defending people's career with no ifs or buts. And I dare say, probably the only 100% pro-DPRK, pro-Juche YouTube channel in the UK. Now, today, I'm going to perhaps go over what might be old ground to some long-standing viewers and supporters, but this is been made at the request of someone who put a comment saying, could I do a video about the Arduous March in the DPRK, the period in the 1990s. Now, of course, I've already done a video on the subject about 5 years ago. I'm going to put a link to that video, and I've covered it in one or two of the other videos, and of course in many of my writings. And of course I wrote this book, The Famine That Never Was, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea in the Arduous March period. And I can speak from personal experience, because not only was I involved with solidarity with the DPRK, with People's Korea in those days, and the study of the Juche idea, but I was actually in the DPRK in 1996. My recollections of that period are covered in the book Famine That Never Was. There'd be a link to purchase that in the description. You can also get that in ebook format, and it's also covered in the book Travels in the Land of Juche Korea, which you can actually download free of charge on the internet. Again, I'll be putting a link in the description of this video. And although today, yes, I'm, basically repeating or recycling old material, I think it was quite relevant to ask about the Arduous March period, because there is a lot of, well, that's an understatement. There's a massive exaggeration, distortion, and outright lying by the mainstream media on this subject, and total falsification by the establishment, by their media. And this was true at the time, and even now there are, there's a false history, a false narrative about the period. So let's talk about the that period. It's really the period from about 1994 to the year 2000, the mid and late 90s in People's Korea. Now, the term Arduous March in the history of People's Korea is a term that goes back a long way. In fact, It comes from the days of the anti-Japanese armed struggle, when the guerrillas of the Korean People's Revolutionary Army, commanded and led by the great leader, Comrade Kim Il-sung, had to undertake a march for 100 days in indescribably difficult conditions. And this was from December 1938 to the early part of 1939. And during that period, they had to face temperatures of 40 degrees centigrade below, minus 40 centigrade, constant battles with the Japanese aggressors, and also severe shortages of provisions. It was a real ordeal for the anti-Japanese guerrillas, but they came through it and emerged victorious. So this name was given to the very difficult period in the DPRK from the mid-1990s. Of course, the imperialist propaganda saying that there was a famine is a lie. However, no one denies, and I do not deny, that this was an extremely difficult period for the people of the DPRK when they faced many difficulties, challenges, and hardships. Yeah, I do not deny this at all. But there's many lies have been told about this period, and I'll deal with those in a minute. The term Arduous March was used to describe the period, invoking the historical precedent of the Arduous March in 1938 and 1939, because this was a period in which the DPRK faced indescribable difficulties. First of all, in July 1994, the great leader, President Kim Il-sung, who had led the DPRK since the 1940s, passed away very suddenly, and this was a grave loss to the Korean people, as well as to revolutionaries of the world and Juche idea followers. But I mean, it had a tremendous emotional impact upon the Korean people. Also, the environment surrounding the Korean Revolution and People's Korea had become very hostile. In the period 1989 to 1991, the many socialist countries, including the USSR, collapsed owing to modern revisionism. So the DPRK lost allies. It was very much on its own, fighting on its own, because it was guided by the Juche idea and fighting under the banner of self-reliance. And in fact, Chairman Kim Jong-il actually declared, "Expect no change from me." He was committed to advancing along the road of independence, self-reliance, and socialism, and not relying on outside powers. The impact of the collapse of the socialist countries was severe, it posed a very serious challenge for the DPRK because former trading agreements were torn up. Worse still, the Russian Federation and China demanded the settlement of foreign trade accounts in dollars, which of course the DPRK did not have because it had little trade with the capitalist world. So in effect, this was a form of double blockade. And of course, in addition to that, to these issues, there were sanctions by the US and other Western countries on the DPRK, and the US was trying to impose more sanctions on the DPRK because of the nuclear issue. On top of this, in 1995 and 1996, there were severe floods that wiped out, I believe, about 60 to 80% of crops. So it was an unbelievably difficult situation that the DPRK was facing. And in fact, the imperialists were secretly rubbing their hands over it. And in May 1996, the media of the imperialist countries of the West actually predicted that the DPRK was going to collapse, and they reported this as a matter of fact, that DPRK would collapse soon. Well, of course, that was their hope, but they were proved wrong because 29 years later, people's career is still there, not just still there, it's prospering, it's building huge streets and new cities. But according to the bourgeois journos and some so-called career experts, quote unquote, the DPRK was going to collapse in May 1996. But as I say, that didn't happen. And a month later, after these predictions, myself and a delegation of the then Juche Study Group of England, which is now called the British Group for the Study of the Juche, visited People's Korea for 2 weeks. We arrived by plane, but we went back on the train all the way from Pyongyang up to Sinuiju, then over to Dadong and on to Beijing, where we caught the plane. And we weren't sure what we were going to find when we got to the DPRK. There were all sorts of wild reports, like I said, the media were saying that the DPRK was going to collapse very soon. They were also saying that millions of people were starving to death. People were starving on the streets, and this kind of thing. So we were a bit apprehensive as to what we might see. So when we arrived in Pyongyang, we didn't see anything like what they claimed was happening. There was no starving people. There was no one begging for food. No one trying to ask us for food. No one raiding dustbins. The situation was very normal. There were no signs of collapse. Everything was functioning. We were able to travel around a bit. We went up to the mountains at Mount Moyhang. And like you said, we also travelled the length of the DPRK by train when we went back, and we didn't see anything like they said was happening. We also visited a cooperative farm, the Sunan cooperative farm, and I remember that visit very well, and the crops were growing well, and in fact we were told that they were harvesting 8 tons of rice and maize per hectare, which is actually a very high figure. So there was no famine or crop failure there. And I remember talking to the chairman of the cooperative farm. We went up to an observation platform. We were given 2 huge apples to eat that were actually bigger than my fist. The apples were an incredible size, and I remember the chairman of the cooperative farm said, "We will never collaborate with the imperialists," and he was quite angry about the reports that were being made in the imperialist media. And it was quite funny. My friend who was on the delegation with me, he put on an American voice and said, "This is Doug Turner, CNN. I'm here at the Sunan Cooperative Farm, and everyone is starving." Sort of poking fun of the allegations. I mean, when we had discussions with our guides and different officials from the Korean Committee for Cultural Relations with foreign countries, as it then was, and with the Korean Association of Social Scientists, they said that the imperialist media were lying or exaggerating the situation. It was pointed out that, DPRK was facing massive difficulties, but it was a socialist country. So although there'd been huge losses in agricultural production, because it was a socialist country, food could be rationed and distributed. And in fact, we were told that rice was supplied with a very big subsidy of about an 80 or 90% subsidy. So the price that people paid for it was virtually next to nothing. You could get a kilo of rice for about next to nothing. So they explained the situation. It was also pointed out that when the Korean people were supposedly all starving to death, they actually built a huge power station, the Ambyon power station, as which would have been impossible to build if everybody had been starving. And I would point out that 2 years later, the DPRK also launched its first ever artificial satellite as well. But anyway, getting back to the point about the visit to the DPRK, yes, we had discussions with different officials about the situation, and they basically refuted the lies that were being told. But we could see with our own eyes that the reports of mass starvation of 3 million deaths simply were not true. They were simply a lie. And what was very interesting was at the time, the DPRK, because the flooding was quite severe and there was damage to infrastructure, DPRK did try to cooperate with international organisations, try to cooperate with some NGOs, and it was very telling when we went up to the mountains. We climbed up Mount Moyhone, and there we encountered another British person, a so-called aid worker for the Red Cross. And he was actually doing sightseeing, buying a can of soft drink, because they had people from one of the hotels selling soft drinks on the mountains. I say there was no massive shortages like the media said. And the thing was, we'd encountered him before in the International Friendship Exhibition, and I say, he was just doing sightseeing. He wasn't doing famine relief or flood recovery work because there wasn't any for him to do. And this showed the falsity of the whole thing. And the NGOs played a very toxic, insidious, and reactionary role in. On the one hand, they tried to fan the propaganda against the DPRK and spread reports about famine and starvation. And on the other hand, they were really acting as regime change, acting as agents of regime change to overthrow socialism and trying to poison the DPRK with imperialist aid. Of course, nowadays, the DPRK says that aid from imperialist countries is a poisoned candy, and quite rightly so. So that's what we saw when we were in the DPRK. And I would just also comment that different pictures were circulated, purporting to be starving Korean children, but we did not see anything like that while we were there. And I think some of the pictures were suspicious. Some people would say they actually show children in an orphanage in Mongolia or children in Kampuchea, but not in the DPRK. And there was also a film made called Children of the Secret State, which actually a lot of it was not filmed in the DPRK. It was filmed in China and in Thailand and in South Korea, and only a few segments of it were actually filmed in the DPRK. So just on to some hard facts about the Arduous March period, which prove that it was untrue that millions supposedly died. Various figures are bandied around. It is, it's been claimed that 3 million actually died, or that 1 million actually died. They can't seem to make up their mind on a figure, which shows that it's been made up. The fact that you actually get different figures, but in fact, if you look at the population statistics, in 1996, the DPRK's population was 22.1 million. In October 2008, the population had grown to over 24 million. So it actually increased by 2 million. So, I mean, this shows that it's absolute nonsense. And by the way, these figures are actually from the World Bank. That's where the figures have come from. One of the most reactionary imperialist institutions that you can have in the world. So the population had actually gone up, not decreased. Now, if 2 or 3 million people had died, the population would have been less. But the fact it went up just shows that this is all a lie. So to try and wrap this up, I would recommend people read my book, The Famine That Never Was. As I say, if you're a bit stuck for money, you can download the ebook. It's quite cheap. There's also my earlier book, Behind the Mirror of Lies, which sort of covers the subject, and of course, Travels in the Land of Juche, Korea also mentions the subject. Anyway, I hope this has answered the question about the Arduous March period, and I wish everybody a good day. Please stick around with the channel because I'll be doing other videos. Should be having a live stream coming up. And if you're not already a subscriber, please hit the subscribe button. It's free of charge to subscribe. And please tell people about the channel. Please share content as much as you can. Get stuck into our activities. We had a good meeting in Brixton at the weekend and also an online meeting. So please join our events. Don't be shy. And you can also donate money to ourselves and to KFA UK. And lastly, as I've mentioned the books in the video, but there's other books. There'll be a link in the description for you to buy books. Anyway, thank you for listening to this and see you all again soon. Goodbye.